What is going on, Jet fans? Matt O'Leary back with another video. We are now 7 days from the first round of the 2025 NFL Draft, and what I wanted to do today was talk about trade back options. So Jets insider Zach Rosenblatt of The Athletic shared 7 teams that could potentially be looking to trade up with the New York Jets for pick number 7. So I wanted to talk about it because there are a lot of Jet fans who would rather trade back in the NFL Draft, and we can talk through different scenarios for what teams might be looking to move up and for what. Because as I've discussed, that yes, it's, most teams in the NFL or most fan bases of teams in the NFL want their team to trade back and get more picks. The Jets did it last year. They moved back 1 pick and got a mid-round pick in return for doing just that. So I wanted to talk about the teams that Zach Rosenblatt lists and who/what position they might be looking to move up for. One we talked about was the New York Giants and how them taking Shedeur Sanders versus not taking Shedeur Sanders might have an impact. And the 2 teams listed here are 2 teams that I agree with that could be looking to move up for a quarterback. The Saints at 9, obviously only 2 pick difference, so you're not getting a massive haul for that, but you're not moving back crazy far. Or the Pittsburgh Steelers are all the way at 21. So 2 very different places in the first round. The Saints are probably picking up a 3rd round pick to move back. The Steelers at 21, you would get a lot to move from 7 to 21. And it also depends on how far you're looking to go down and if you're comfortable with the players that might be available there for you at pick number 21. At the end, we'll talk about guys listed on in his article that the Jets may have interest in a move down. But clearly very different options, right? Like at pick 9, you're still probably talking about, Tyler Warren and Armand Membu. At 21, they're not going to be there. So you have to be okay with potentially losing guys like that by moving down that far. What about the teams that don't need a quarterback, and what would they be looking to move up for? So you have the San Francisco 49ers. They desperately need an offensive tackle. So if Armand Membu is there at 7, would they be interested in throwing in a mid-round pick to get up to pick number 7 to get an offensive tackle? I mean, they have Trent Williams at left tackle. He's getting older, but they desperately need a right tackle. So would they be willing to move up with the New York Jets to land him or land a offensive tackle? I think, if they were to move up, that's the position they could potentially target. Defensive line is a need for them too, to an extent, but I think right tackle is more glaring, and if you're trading up, I think it would be for that. The Cowboys, Ashton Jeanty is listed here as the pick that they would be moving up for, or a wide receiver. I think you can make the case that they need both of those things, and whether that's Ted McMillan or Matthew Golden or whoever else. If they're moving up, it would be for someone on offense. Jerry Jones is not afraid to be aggressive and at times maybe a little bit reckless, but trading up for a running back is really unheard of. But if they really like him and think he'll be a difference maker in Dallas, then it's something that I could absolutely see them doing. You have the Colts at 13 who have their eyes on Tyler Warren. If the Jets don't take him at 7, I think he is going to be, or the Colts will be the team that ends up selecting him. Now, maybe they don't think he'll get that far, so they'll call the New York Jets and see if they're interested in a trade. And who knows, maybe the Jets' interest, will say in, air quotes, in Tyler Warren is more smokescreen. And, if they being the Colts want to ensure that they're getting their guy, and the Jets can move back, and, at 13, that might potentially lose you out on Armand Membu. But again, we'll talk about some other guys that the Jets could be targeting in the middle of the first round towards the end of the video. The Falcons at 15, they desperately need an edge rusher. You have that connection already in place with Jeff Ulbrich as he's back in Atlanta now. I think they need, defensive line help. So maybe they're moving up for, Jalen Walker or Shamar Stewart or someone of that caliber. They could just sit and stay at 15, but if they want to ensure they're getting a quality player and maybe want to jump in front of the Saints and the Panthers, who pick at pick number 8 for the Panthers and number 9 for the Saints, they might want to jump in front of those 2 teams who are in their division. The last team listed is the Denver Broncos at pick 20, and Ashton Jeanty is the player that Zach Rosenblatt circles. But I might even put Tyler Warren in there. I think they could use a tight end for their young quarterback. So if they really like him, and maybe they're not on the same wavelength as Colston Loveland, who we'll talk about in a second, and they want to move up and get the potentially the best guy in the class, that's something that I could see them being interested in as well. So you have 5 teams that could be looking to trade up for not a quarterback, and we went through all the positions that might make sense for them. And then the 2 teams who are quarterback needy in the Saints and Steelers, if they like Shedeur Sanders and he's available, do they pull the trigger on a trade up? Now, who would the Jets target if they do move back, and assuming it's out of the range for the guys we've talked about the most? Colston Loveland, Shamar Stewart, Nick Eamon-Wari, Malachi Starks, Matthew Golden, Tet McMillan, Calvin Banks, and Derek Harmon are listed by Zach Rosenblatt. Now, Loveland would be a favorite of mine. He's a tight end who, in my opinion, is the second best tight end in this class. I think he's going in the first round, clearly, as that's a trade back option for the Jets, right? But he absolutely has the receiving upside. I think he would be an interesting target. Stewart, Eamon-Wari, and Starks aren't some of my favorite options for the Jets, but then you get into the 2 wide receivers and Golden and McMillan. I like McMillan more, but clearly would not be upset with Matthew Golden and his speed. Just very different stylistically at the wide receiver position. Calvin Banks is an interesting one. Is he going to be a tackle or a guard at the next level? I like Banks. I actually think he could be the Jets' right tackle in this scenario, so I'm not opposed to that either. And Derek Harmon at interior defensive line is a player that they met with. They took a top 30 visit with. Really good player on the interior of a defensive line that could, potentially pair with Quinnen Williams. So you have a variety of different options, and depending on how far you move back, you could be adding anywhere between a 2nd, 3rd round pick, somewhere in that range, and potentially even more if you're trading back to 21 with the Steelers. That's pretty far. I think you get a pretty decent sized haul, but if it's only a couple picks, you're probably talking about a 3rd round pick that you're acquiring in the process. So let me know what you think. Do you think the Jets trade back, and what team do you think makes sense with looking to move up? I'm Matt O'Leary. Subscribe if you're new, and I'll catch you next time.